I am just about to embark on my next transformation project, and I have a whole bunch of overlocking stitching to unpick. So in this video, I thought I would show you 3 methods that I use to undo overlocking, depending on the situation. Many people think there may be just 1 or 2 ways of undoing overlocking, but there is actually a third. The first method I'm going to show you is by far the quickest, but also by far the messiest. That involves snipping the looper threads on the reverse side. So once you've established that this is the side that was facing down on the overlocker, you can just go with your scissors, just snip those overlocking threads. This might also work if you snip the top loopers, I don't know, but I always just tend to snip the bottom ones. Once you've snipped those, the needle thread should just be able to pull out like this, and you have undone your overlocking stitches. The reason I say this is the messiest is because, as you can see, you end up with all these little threads, all these tiny little threads where we've cut through the bottom looper. And if you end up having to use the seam allowance in whatever it is you're going to use the fabric for next, you will then end up having to just pick out all these tiny little threads. You could just take some masking tape or scotch tape or something and just run it along and rip it off. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you can try that if you are in a bit more of a rush. The second unpicking method is the one that I probably use most frequently. For this one, we are going to be working with the top side of the overlocking facing up. What I'm going to do is just take my unpicker and I'm just going to get it under the needle thread. So that is the thread that just runs in the horizontal line of stitching going all the way across. I'm just going to keep unpicking stitch by stitch until I get a nice decent tail on the end of that thread. Once I've got enough of a tail that I can use to just grab onto, what I'm going to do is just go a little bit further down the overlocking. How far you're able to go just depends on the tension of the overlocking and how embedded the stitches are. But for the demonstration, I'm going to just go about this far. There's sometimes I can go even further, but for the demonstration, let's go this far. What I'm going to do is just go a little bit along, and I'm going to get my unpicker under the needle stitches, and I'm just going to unpick 1 stitch there. And then I'll come back to my thread tail here, and I will just pull. Initially, it will look like it's just gathering, but then eventually you will feel the thread starting to pull out. That has now pulled out completely, and then all the looper threads will be intact still, and then you can just take those off afterwards. So this one generates a lot less mess than method 1, but like I said, it depends on the tension of the overlocking and the type of fabric as to how much of a distance you can go along. So it will take a little bit longer than doing method 1, but it's by far the neatest and by far the most common method that I use. Let's now have a go at method 3, which doesn't always work. It's not always easy, but it's just quite fun to know that it exists. So for this one, I'm going to, again, just get a little bit of a thread tail going on the needle thread. I'm just going to unpick a few stitches and just get a little bit of a tail going here on the needle thread. Now I'm going to hold that needle thread in my left hand, and I'm going to hold the 2 looper threads in my right hand. And I'm just going to just wiggle back and forth. This takes a little bit of practice. It's not always very easy to get from the start. But if you just wiggle the threads back and forth, and you have to keep tension on the loopers, so you do always have to keep adjusting your grip. But you will just be able to see the overlocking just unraveling along. This is not the best quality thread in the world, as you can see. It just sort of goes into a little puff of cloud. But yeah, sometimes this one will get a little bit stuck, as it does here. So it's not always the most reliable method, but it's quite cool to just know that it exists. So let's just have another go at trying that again. I've just got little tails on each side. So I've got the loopers in my right hand, and I'm just separating them with my fingers like that. And then just sort of wiggling back and forth. You do have to keep a lot of tension on the looper threads for this to work. Well, let's just have one last go with that method. Like I said, it's not the one I tend to use the most because it is a bit fiddly and it doesn't always get you all the way there. So method 2 is usually my most preferred. So here I'm just going back to method 2 just to undo this string of overlocking. And this overlocking is not super tight, so you can see I can just pull the needle thread on one side, almost just move this along like I'm gathering. It just feels like I'm gathering the fabric together. But eventually the other end of that thread tail, oops, unless it breaks in the meantime, of course. And if that does, then all you do is just find your tail again. Just unpick the end till you get another tail again. And then you can take all the looper threads off. One of these days I will perfect this method, but anyway, until then I will just stick with method 2. I hope you found this video useful. Make sure you save it so you can come back to it the next time you need to do a mammoth amount of unpicking of overlocking. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.